Today's video is going to help you get back in shape without injury, and we're particularly thinking about the lower back here, but other areas too. And if you follow the 9 steps or tips in this video, you're going to have the most success with the least chance of injury. This video is going to be packed full of tons of tips, and also we're going to link some other videos as well that are going to help expand particular areas of interest. So you're going to have timestamps underneath me. Really, this is a perfect video if you're thinking about January getting back in shape. That is one of those times of the year where these principles, these tips often get ignored and we end up getting injuries by February. So hopefully this is going to help you have a success whenever you're starting your workout this time round. As I mentioned, this is going to have tons of resources in it. So remember, if you find this video helpful, like it, save it, share it with yourself, whatever, so you can come back and revisit some of these tips. We'll have all of the links in the description below, as well as probably a couple of cards popping up over my head linking to other videos as well throughout this video. With that out of the way, let's get on to tip number 1, which is you should scale your workouts over time. What that means is that we start off when you're getting into this working out regime, whatever the exercises are. You want to start off, maybe it's 3 times a week that you're going to be working out. You don't want to overcook it straight away and start off doing 7 days a week, week 1, because by week 2 or week 3, you're going to overwork yourself. You're not necessarily going to have the energy, the habits, the endurance to be able to do that. If we start off at 3 times a week for say that first month, we can set the target of moving up to maybe working out 4 times a week by the end of that month and then build from there. For most people, for the long term, working 4 or 5 times a week working out 4 or 5 times a week is going to be sufficient for them to make significant progress over the long term, whilst also having the rest days in there to actually help your body recover, but also making it not too onerous. Sometimes if we set ourselves the expectation that we're going to work out 7 days a week, we don't get time for anything else, and that starts to become a problem and a mental motivation block to actually continue with our workout. So start with 3 times a week, especially if you haven't been working out in a while, or you're working to get back in shape because you haven't done these sorts of things in a very long time, if ever. Set yourself realistic expectations of doing it 3 times a week to start, and then scale from there. Tip number 2 is having a post-workout routine. This is absolutely vital for your short, medium, and long-term success, and should be done throughout your training process or your working out process. We have a link in the description to one of the post-workout routines that we recommend, which is freely available on our YouTube channel, and it's on the homepage. So definitely check that out after this video. But essentially, this post-workout routine is there to help loosen off some of those tissues. So for example, if we're thinking about back pain, one of the common issues that we get when we start to build up our training inappropriately is that the leg muscles get really, really stiff. They tighten up as they're getting stronger and as they're getting used. They maybe have lactic acid building up in those tissues, etc. And as they become stiff on a day-to-day basis outside of your training, it starts to pull on the lower back. And this is one of those injuries that can kind of creep up on you. You get maybe 2-3 weeks in, you haven't done any of the proper stretching, and all of a sudden you start to find, oh, your back's a bit stiff when you're at work or when you're around the house. Why is that? And you don't really have a real cause, and it's because you're not necessarily loosening off those muscles after the workout, giving them chance to heal properly, giving them chance to exchange some of those waste products like lactic acid that have built up in the tissues, and therefore it just starts to accumulate load, accumulate stress. So by having an appropriate post-workout routine, you're able to unload the spine, you're able to loosen off the hips, and just have a nice little contrast with the hard working out you're doing with a bit of relaxation work as well. And it doesn't need to take tons of time. The routine that's in the description below, about 15 minutes and you'll get it all done. But doing this regularly can really, really help optimize your recovery from sessions and keep you working out for longer. Tip number 3 is really important, especially when you're starting, but also if you're bringing in any new routines or any new exercises along the way. Whenever you start a new workout, you want to make sure that you are incorporating large compound movements. These are movements like squats, hip hinges, or deadlifts, as you might call them, and other exercises that involve many muscle groups. A more advanced version might be a lunge, for example, because it's using your core, it's using your legs, it's using balance, it's using your upper body if you're carrying a weight, etc. All of these muscles are working together in tandem, also applicable to real life in the way we use our body on a daily basis. So you're going to get your maximum bang for your buck. But focusing on the technique first to make sure you're competent doing these exercises is going to be really, really important, because quite often it's jumping into a routine with full force, full vigor, without necessarily focusing on the technique is what starts to strain the knees, it strains the hips, it strains the ankles. We start to get shoulder pain, maybe we start to get back pain from doing these exercises inappropriately. A little bit of time mastering, maybe even a week or 2, it doesn't need to be longer than that, mastering a technique will then allow you to push things harder. And conversely, if we think about exercises that aren't really worth doing, especially when you're beginning and getting into this sort of process. Things like bicep curls. Doing bicep curls or tricep press downs, yeah, sure, we want to tone our arms, but that's not really going to be the most effective way of doing so. Doing these larger compound moves is going to burn more calories, it's going to involve more muscles, it's going to be more time efficient, and it's just a more effective way of doing things. If, of course, you're watching this video and you're an experienced bodybuilder and you're looking to get those peaky biceps, then yes, you're going to need to focus on some isolation bicep curls. But for most of you watching this video, that's not you. You're looking to get in shape in the most effective way, and you've got other things you want to do on a daily basis. So focus on those compounds and get your technique right first. Number 4 kind of follows on from the last exercise, and it's a specific word of advice for avoidance. Avoid high impact exercises. It's all too common that we feel, we join a new workout regime and there's lots of stuff. We want to bang those calories in, we want to work hard, we want to get a sweat, and that's why there's a lot of leaping and bounding involved. There's lots of plyometrics. There's 2 issues with this. Number 1, it's marginally more effective than doing basic static exercises. For example, a squat versus a squat jump. You're not really going to be burning that many more calories, but the process of doing the squat jump, you're going to, number 1, that's a progression that you could use later on to enhance your workout once you're more competent. But you're also, number 2, having to deal with ballistic load. You're having to deal with acceleration and deceleration, something which requires more competence than simply just that static movement without the impact. Then you've got things like burpees, etc. They require much more competence in many areas. They are not beginner exercises. Yes, sure, they will make you tired, but really it's just not got a place in early beginner training, especially if you're trying to get back into routines, even if you have been experienced in the past. Start with the basics and build from there, and maybe, if you really want to get into some of those ballistic movements, you can incorporate them later on in the future, a good couple of months down the line. Tip number 5 comes for cardio. Now, the first thing to note is once you're competent at a routine, the routine itself, so a resistance training routine using bands, kettlebells, dumbbells, machines in the gym, that can actually be a cardio workout in of itself for you. But if we're thinking about specific cardio in cardio sense, we've got things like walking and we've got the elliptical trainer if you're in the gym. Those are 2 great options to start out with because they're low impact and they're very easy to just ease yourself into things whilst you're doing your resistance training, which we've mentioned a couple of things already in these tips so far. If you are someone that wants to get into things like running, then how you do this is so important. Like with many things, how we do it is often more important than what we are doing. And there's a video in the description on specific guidance for you getting into running. I would say leave it a little bit till you've started some strengthening work, but if you get into running, not doing stuff like couch to 5K, but using a treadmill if you've got one available, or specific timings and distances if you're out and about doing your running, then this can be a great way for someone who hasn't done it to get into it safely and effectively. And so many of our members have used that particular video to help them get into running if it's something that you're particularly interested in. If not, don't worry about it. The elliptical and going for a walk can be perfect alongside some hard workouts. One additional bit with regards to cardio, cycling is a no-no. I really would encourage you to leave cycling out. And again, we've got tons of videos. I won't bother linking to those, but you can search them on the channel if you're interested on why. Number 6 is all about diet. It's no point working hard, being diligent with all the tips I've mentioned so far, getting consistent, working hard if you're not providing nutrition to help your body adapt. Remember, we're training for a number of reasons. If we're training to strengthen our body so we can function more effectively in the world without injury, that's a great goal. But what is actually strengthening? It is the stimulation from the workout then being used by your body in the presence of appropriate resources, food, nutrition, to rebuild those muscular tissues, the joint tissues, the ligaments, the tendons, to strengthen them so that we get that training effect. Training is one part, but food intake is the next. You want to make sure you're getting appropriate levels of calorie intake, and you're going to want to make sure you're getting the right amount of things like protein. It's so very important for your recovery. We actually have a full link in the description again to the Back in Shape podcast episode where we talked a little bit about this in much more detail. So check that out if you are interested. But needless to say, it is so important that you get your dietary side of things on point to support your good work in the gym. Tip number 7 is all about moderation as we move forwards. Maybe when you start, we've kind of factored those in already because we said about scaling, only working out 3 times a week. So you've got those rest days. And on those rest days, you remember I mentioned that post-workout routine from tip number 2? You can do that post-workout routine. A little bit of extra stretching can go a long way in tandem with your hard sessions. But as you go forwards, maybe you start a new intensity. Maybe you step it up a notch in some of the exercises, maybe those squats, maybe those hip hinges, maybe the lunges or some other part of the workout. you might find that you need to back off and give yourself a little rest day to help your body adapt to this new training intensity. Remember, some of you will have that inclination to just go full hog, train 7 days a week because you enjoy it, you get into it, and you don't necessarily think that having a rest day it's almost like a cheat day. I remember a couple of years ago, we had a member say, I had Christmas Day off and I felt guilty. You have to remember that when you are training, recovery days are active days. You're actively recovering. It's not a wasted day, it's not a waste of time, and it's not a step back. Sometimes recovery is just as important, if not more important, than the workout days where you're pushing yourself hard. The two need to be balanced effectively. And as you go through your training and you scale, like we mentioned in point number 1, you're going to find that rest days become a little bit more relevant, and then you can use them a little bit less, and then a little bit more and a little bit less. And that's something, as you go forwards over the months, successfully training without injuring yourself, you will start to feel a natural rhythm for when you can incorporate a little bit more of these and a little bit less. And with that in mind, you'll have the best success for the long term because you can balance those two effectively. Number 8 kind of ties into number 7, and that is to expect soreness along the way. When you do take a step up in your intensity, you might find that there's a little bit of soreness. Maybe you've worked hard on those squats, maybe a new resistance, maybe you did an extra set or two. Maybe you've done a couple of days of that higher intensity and you start to notice those legs are sore. You remember back from the start of the video, that's one of the reasons that we're incorporating the post-workout routine. But as we do, sometimes when we get into working out for the very first time, so when you're starting, let's say it's January, for example, you might notice there's a little bit of soreness that first week or two, and then that'll start to go away. But when you then step up the intensity, you might notice it again. Expect this to happen as you go through periods of increased intensity from one level to the next, in tandem with point number 7, and incorporate those rest days accordingly. And if you start to get that balance, you'll find you have a lot more success for the long term, and that soreness is something that comes and then it settles off and then it goes and then it comes again next time you increase your intensity. We are now at the last point, number 9. If you're not sure, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Follow a program, follow some sort of exercise regime that kind of hits some of the points we've mentioned above, that allows you to just get on with the workout. You can follow the appropriate video guidance on how to do these exercises, addressing some of the technique. You've got what you're doing, it's got the right exercises, not the wrong exercises, and you've got a schedule to move forwards. That is really the most important thing. Some of you watching this will maybe have the competence to be able to put together your own routine, but others will need a little bit of more support. And if you do need a little bit of more support with what sort of program to do, then use the link in the description or a link above my head to learn more about the Back in Shape program. Yes, some of those exercises might well be a little bit premature for you, but there you've got a full post-workout routine. You've got everything you need from a support. You've got a variety of workouts that are approved for being safe for your back, specifically in mind, so you can actually really get back in shape this time with the support necessary to avoid having any injuries. Hopefully you have found this If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I do hope you found this video particularly helpful and maybe taken advantage of some of those additional resources that we've linked to in the video. Remember, there's a comment section down there for a reason. So if you've got any questions, if you're not sure about any of the particular tips, then please do post in there. We read and reply to all of your comments. As always, if you did find this one helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you want more videos like this, educational videos, which are a bit more talking head, like this particular video where we're covering different topics academically, or some exercise-based videos, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel to stay up to date whenever we release a new video, as well as the weekly Back in Shape podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. Hope it's helped, and see you in the next one.